This is a true story and actually funny at the same time. I was dating a woman from Africa, and she was sitting on me next to the couch when she was reading an article from the New Yorker that said I was a white supremacist. And she looks at me and says, "I didn't know you were a white supremacist." I'm like, I didn't know that either. Texans are a different group of people. We look at the world the right way, in my opinion. I was in Saudi Arabia for 7 years, and you understand how important not only the United States is, but how important Texas is.
Ready to roll?
Yep.
All right.
Real Texan.
Why should this matter to real Texans? Hey, welcome to this edition of Real Texans, where we talk to men and women who are doing great things to make the Lone Star State a better place. And so I'm real excited to sit down with Larry Brock, Lieutenant Colonel, retired.
Yes, sir.
Larry Brock, United States Air Force. Larry, thanks for sitting down. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be here.
So you have a beyond fascinating both background and recent story. A lot of us know you because of what happened on January 20th of this year, when Donald Trump issued a pardon, ending a really horrific 4.5 years.
Yes, sir.
For you and your family, related to the events of January 6th, 2021. Before we talk about January 6th, 2021, I want to talk, though, about how you felt on January 20th, 2025, when Donald Trump signed that pardon.
I was extremely relieved, obviously, but not just for me, for the other, 1,400 January 6ers. I actually happened to be at Federal Medical Center Carswell. I was working to get Jaleese Middleton out of prison that day. And so it was actually amazing the reach you can have on X and other platforms, because I tweeted something that reached a grassroots activist, and it also reached the right-hand lady of Attorney General Ken Paxton, and phone calls were made to Carswell to get Jaleese Middleton out of prison that day. So I was beyond relieved. I was happy that the nightmare was going to end and we could start rebuilding our lives. And even that's taking time, but we're getting there.
Okay, so I want to back up. You're a Texas boy.
Yes, sir.
You grew up in the Metroplex. I think Bedford was kind of,
yes, sir,
basic stomping ground, right? Why did you go to the Air Force Academy? What in 85, class of 89, what in 1980, 84, 85 made you think, I think I'm going to go to the Air Force Academy. I think I want to fly A-10 Warthogs.
Well, I'm a fourth-generation American military Texan. Mm-hmm. So my great-grandfather served in World War I. My grandfather, World War II. His brother was killed in World War II in the European theater. My father served in Vietnam, and now me. So as a child growing up, we would go to West Texas, and my great-grandma had 4 photos on a wall of all of them in their uniforms. And it made an impression on me as a child. And then I think my father and my grandfather, both of whom had a desire to be a pilot, I would say they kind of steered me in that direction. But then, when the opportunity, arose, it was just something I wanted to do. The crazy thing is I went to the Air Force Academy with the intent of still becoming a doctor. But after my freshman year there, my dad got me a backseat ride in an F-4 Phantom, which was the reserve unit he was in. And once I was in the air and doing things, I was like, I've got to do this for a living.
Sold completely.
Completely. Yes, sir.
Okay. So, it's all, the A-10 has always fascinated me as an airplane. Not so much because of the airplanes. I don't know much about, mechanics of planes, right? What's fascinating me is the way you guys who fly those, you refer to yourselves as Warthog drivers, not as pilots. You're not a Warthog pilot. You're a Warthog. Can you explain why that is?
Well, I think it's because you become one with the plane when you're actually flying it. I know that may sound crazy, but
sounds a little crazy.
You get to a point where it's just an extension of yourself. You can look at a piece of sky and say, I need to be up here so that I can roll in on that target at the right dive angle. There was a time once where I got in the airplane and apparently I started the engines, did all the things that were required, and I kind of really didn't think about it again until I was just about to take off. So it was a great opportunity.
It became part of you.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. And, There's a saying in the Air Force that the A-10 is an easy plane to fly, but it's a very hard plane to fly tactically. The expertise comes in employing that airplane, air-to-ground ordnance in close proximity to friendly troops. And so I'll be honest with you, I flew the best fighter in the U.S. Air Force with the best mission. I could not have asked for anything better. I was really lucky to have that opportunity.
Okay, so your career in the Air Force, you were 8 years active duty? 9 years active duty?
8 years active duty.
And then 20 years in the reserves?
Yes, sir.
Give or take. Right?
Give or take.
And Uncle Sam had you go to lots of fascinating places over those.
Yes, sir. I always say that I got the opportunity to tour God's brown earth. So I spent a lot of time in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Turkey, flew through Syria, never dropped anything in Syria. Didn't really go into Iran, but real close a couple of times when they merited it. And then obviously Afghanistan and lots of flying over Iraq as well.
Yeah. So with all those years away, all those years seeing
yes, sir.
brown earth, and you also got to see some kind of fun, cool other places.
Yes, sir.
Why did you come? Why was it important to you to come back to Texas?
It's home. Good question. Texans are a different group of people. We look at the world the right way, in my opinion. I was in Saudi Arabia for 7 years, and you understand how important not only the United States is, but how important Texas is. I know it's a little crazy, but if you were to dig through my X feed, I go to high school football games. Why? Because that's Texas. That, in a nutshell, is everything I love about this state. A lot of guys working hard, planning, attacking, doing things. You've got the parents on the side cheering. So I love Texas high school football. I love everything about this state, honestly. We are a great group of citizens. I heard it described by a good representative from Denton County, Richard Hayes. Texas is the red heartbeat of red America. And I can't say enough good things about my fellow Texans.
Outstanding. It has been striking to me, maybe you've had the same experience, go around the world and, someone can say they're from Vermont and a person near the planet will eyes glow. In Texas, people's eyes will glaze over, right? You can say all these other state names, but when you say Texas, I don't care where you are on the planet, people know Texas. People understand Texas. In fact, in many ways, to a lot of folks, Texas is in some ways separate from the United States and kind of in that mythos kind of way, in that way of identifying.
It absolutely is. We're approaching the Battle of San Jacinto on Monday when we won our independence. But, working overseas for as long as I did, you heard many times, where are you from? Well, I'm from England. I'm from Australia. I'm from the United States. You ask a Texan that question, I'm from Texas. Almost all the time, they will say Texas rather than the United States. Not that I'm not proud of my service to our country, but, I'm from Texas. It's home.
Right. And look, in many ways, that's the way a lot of our founding fathers viewed this whole thing. George Washington was a Virginian.
Yes,
right? Sir. You kind of rinse and repeat through the founding fathers. They viewed themselves with that kind of identity. They were proud of what they'd created, but they were still Virginians. They were, from the Carolinas. They were from Massachusetts, where they were from. And in Texas, we've still kind of held on to that, haven't we?
I would say very much so. I think we are uniquely proud of our state. I would say the only state that actually rivals us is people are proud of being from California. I know it sounds a little crazy, but they really are.
From being the
yes, sir.
They're proud to be
yes, sir.
From there. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I want to talk about January 6th because I think for most of us, when your name entered our consciousness, it was because we were told you're a racist, a terrorist.
Mm-hmm.
We were told that you were walking around the Capitol with zip ties clearly implied.
Mm-hmm.
You were there hoping to hog tie yourself, a congressman or a Capitol police officer, or a whole lot of implications about what you were.
Yes, sir.
What you were doing on January 6th. And as the story kept being told over and over, a racist, a terrorist, someone coming in to do grave harm, a a retired lieutenant colonel from the Air Force into the Air Force Academy, but yet you're suddenly a domestic terrorist.
Yes, sir.
I want to pause there and just ask this before I kind of get to the punchline. Did you recognize yourself at all in the way you were being portrayed? Did you recognize that Larry Brock?
No, sir. It honestly gets to a point where the hurricane of information is so chock full of lies that the people that do know you know that now nothing is true. And I'll give you a perfect example. I had a niece in college, and when they accused me of being a racist, she's like, okay, now I don't believe anything they're saying. This is a true story and actually funny at the same time. I was dating a woman from Africa at the time, and she was sitting on me next to the couch when she was reading an article from the New Yorker that said I was a white supremacist. And she looks at me and says, I didn't know you were a white supremacist. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that either. I mean, in 29 years in the military, you learn how dumb racism is. The vast majority of my unit in New Orleans was African-American gentlemen. My crew chief was an African-American man, and I trusted him clearly with my life. So racism is it's not who I am. It's dumb. They went too far that day. And then terrorism. I mean, I fought terrorists for this country for all of my adult life. That one really hurt. And, I don't know that you know this or not, but they actually pulled my pilot's licenses from me because they said I was a threat of domestic terrorism and an air piracy risk to the United States. And I only recently got them back. And I'm still working to get the FAA medical because now a psychologist, some random guy in the FAA has said, well, we've got to go have you see a psychiatrist. So I'm working with Congressman Gill, Congressman Fallon, and Congressman Van Dyne to, shall we say, change that fine gentleman's mind. In terms of the other things, the criminal, that hurt also. There's a whole story behind, that the FBI went after me, told me that I was looking at 40 years in prison. I refused to talk to them until I had an attorney, and they didn't like that very much. Let's see, the other words.
The Constitution. You, yes, sir. At the age of 18, raised your right hand. You did so again, being commissioned as a lieutenant into the Air Force to defend the Constitution. Key element, our founding father, the Constitution was not going to be approved without the Bill of Rights. That was the deal that was hatched. One of those had to do with the right to representation. And yet we now have the FBI threatening you because you wanted a lawyer? That's insane. Where are we in this world?
Well, I asked that question a lot over the last 4 years. I honestly think that this was such an aberration from American norms that we have to punish those people involved. Justice Robert Jackson was on the Supreme Court during World War II, and President Roosevelt asked him to lead the Nuremberg trials. And when he was trying these people, he said, we must bring them to justice because the world cannot endure it being repeated. It's the same thing with these people in that the Republic will not survive another round of a two-tiered justice system. We have to fix what was done. We have to have a little restorative justice, and we have to also bring these people that did this to justice. And I'm hoping that Attorney General Bondi will do it, but I'm just not sure.
So you spent close to a year in confinement, 130 some odd days in the hole.
Yes, sir.
Separated out from other prisoners. For the, as best I can tell, and kind of reading through, over the couple of years, you entered the Capitol, walking peacefully past a couple of police officers, just standing there.
Yes, sir.
You weren't, running in with a baseball bat and a gun and anything. You're just kind of walking in like a whole lot of folks, doors are open.
Yes, sir. The doors were open. I crossed no barriers, went through no fences, walked right by 4 policemen on my way in through open doors. Inside the Capitol, on 2 separate occasions, I protected the Capitol from vandalism, and on 2 separate occasions, I protected police from assault. One of them, Officer Nairobi Timberlake, testified in my trial that I had acted to defend him and his partner. And you can see on videotape with your own eyes when I exited the Capitol voluntarily, another man was confronting the police in what I thought was too aggressive a manner, and I put my arms around him, patted him on the back, and said, let's go. So for that, as you said, I was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Now, the felony I was convicted of was the obstruction of Congress, the one that the Supreme Court eventually reduced in scope to an extent to where the government agreed that it no longer applied to my actions on that day. Now, the government said that in August, but the judge chose not to sign off of that removal of the felony until 1 week prior to President Trump's inauguration. Now, I believe he did that to deliberately deny me of my opportunity to vote. So there were a lot of consequences. Like in Texas, I wanted to register voters to assist President Trump. Can't do that as a convicted felon. I was asked to be a precinct chair. I couldn't change my address as a convicted felon. He kept me a convicted felon, and it deprived me of my right to have a say in government in a very critical election.
So your civil liberties taken away from you. The ability to even kind of the most basic things that most of us would take for granted, the ability to, like I say, engage by registering voters. Can't do that. So, and again, I'm struck by that. The image I remember being, us being, forced down our throats to define you. There's a guy holding some zip ties in your hand. Again,
yes,
with
sir.
a still image. It's the importance of a still image versus a video.
Yes,
right?
sir.
The still image. And I remember thinking, wow, what a jerk. My gosh. Clearly this guy must be guilty because no rational person takes zip ties to a rally.
Yes, sir.
But you didn't take zip ties to a rally, despite what, federal prosecutors told the world.
Yes, sir. That's one of the things that's actually most galling to me is, of course, they're never going to apologize or say anything wrong, but they willfully and deliberately misled the American people as to my intentions. The tape was there, and I believe they had already seen it, where I step on and pick up the zip ties. And I did it so that nobody else could do anything crazy with them. You see that in the video clearly on my website. And I walked by probably 8 or 9 policemen that didn't say a word about me having those, and then I threw them away. But the crazy thing is, so I walked onto the Senate floor and said, you need to get out of the vice president's chair. If I'm telling someone to respect a chair, why would I be there to hurt somebody that I ultimately respect? We've got senators, we've got congressmen, and the vice president. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense, but it didn't fit their narrative. And that's why as you said, they went with the still photo. And I apologize to all my fellow Texans for giving them that great optic. I wish I had thought about it more clearly. I will tell you that body armor, I wore it to protect myself from BLM and Antifa. I wish I had not done that. And in hindsight, if you've got to wear body armor to a rally, probably not a wise thing to go.
Yeah, but look, I appreciate your comments there, but let's put ourselves back in January 2021, where we just watched for 9 months.
Yes, sir.
Antifa and BLM burning down cities, setting fire, attacking people.
Yes, sir.
I'm not sure that, again, in the much more friendly environment of 2025, do you need to wear some sort of personal protection, passive personal protection?
Absolutely.
When you're going to a rally in Washington, D.C.? But January 2021 was a little different.
Yes, sir. In December of that year, a Trump supporter had been stabbed at a rally before that. So my thought process there was, if they're going to throw rocks at me or try and stab me, at least I'll have some protection. I took nothing that could be construed as offensive. Normally, I carry a little pocket knife. I didn't even bring that because I didn't want there to be any perception that I was there to cause any trouble. And yet that's exactly the way the media described it, the way the government described it.
Because they were going for a narrative rather than facts.
Yes, sir.
For going to kind of create this image. And it was Latin. I think maybe the galling, or what should maybe be the galling thing to many of us, to the rest of us as citizens, was I'm not sure that they cared about Larry Brock. I think that they cared about using Larry Brock as a way to tell the rest of us.
Yes, sir. That
if we can do this, to a decorated officer in the United States Air Force, if we can do this guy, you better all just shut up. That was the message that's the message I got.
Absolutely, sir. And when I talk to various Republican groups now, I will ask them that question. Do you feel like the Department of Justice went out of its way to intimidate or coerce conservative Americans? And the answer is almost unanimous always, and that's yes. If you look up in the United States Criminal Code, the very definition of domestic terrorism, it is to commit a felony in order to intimidate or coerce a civilian population. And I believe through their deprivation of rights and a conspiracy to deprive me of my rights, they have committed felonies in support of their goal of terrorizing conservative Americans. What was the red speech? Why 1,500 Americans? Why didn't they go after first the people that were actually violent on January the 6th? They didn't do that. They targeted law enforcement officers and military officers to go after first because they wanted to send a clear message to population centers that they considered to be a threat to the Biden regime.
Right. Okay. So, you're going through this. You finally are released from confinement.
Yes, sir.
But you weren't really free yet, were you?
No, sir. So if I might, the 127 days that I spent in the hole, do you know what that was for? That was for urging other January 6ers to be loyal to President Trump. Because of that, they said I was spreading communications and dissent throughout the prison system. And so not only was I already in prison, then I spent 127 days in a 5x8 cell. So they upgraded my minimum security time to supermax time. That's essentially what I did. So when I got out on June the 4th of last year, I had to spend a month in a halfway house, and then I had to spend 2 months under home arrest. So I really wasn't technically free until August the 20th. Now, here's the crazy thing. During that time period, I won an appeal that said I was over-sentenced. I won an appeal saying that the felony should be vacated. Congress changed the law to where if you had 0 prior offenses, your sentence was reduced. So all of those made my maximum sentence, according to federal guidelines, 6 months. And yet the judge did nothing. He just sat on the paperwork so that he got his full 2 years. He got his pound of flesh from me. And he's one of the same judges that is vexing President Trump with their, judicial temporary restraining orders against the actions of the administration.
When we look at, I have great sympathy for what you went through. I think
yes, sir.
Anyone watching our conversation, we have great sympathy for what you went through and the other J6ers. But I think what is in some ways more troubling or scary is the damage done to our Constitution, the damage done to any one person. Poor Larry got stuck in prison for some time. Yeah, okay, whatever. But you set that precedent. You set that.
Yes, sir.
That becomes a lot easier to throw the next guy in jail, to lock up the next inconvenient person. We've sullied the judicial system that we're supposed to count on.
Yes, sir.
To fairly call balls and strikes.
And you brought it up earlier, how important and critical the Bill of Rights are. Well, let's just look at it from that perspective. The First Amendment, the right to free speech, gone for conservative
Peaceably
Americans.
assemble.
The right to peacefully assemble, gone. The Fourth Amendment, right against unreasonable search and seizure. They took all of our cell phone data. They took our bank data without warrant. Okay, then we get to, let's say, the Sixth Amendment, the right to a fair, speedy trial. All of that was abrogated. All right. A fair trial cannot be had as a conservative American in a jury pool that voted 96% for Hillary, 95% for Biden, and 93% for Kamala. That is not a jury of my peers. Now, let's get back to one other thing. The judge we've made multiple motions to have me released from prison since the, appeals, et cetera. One of the things he said to keep me in there was that I have expressed no remorse. I have a Fifth Amendment right to remain silent, which is what I did. And so my First, Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendment rights were abrogated by the D.C. Circuit. And so you're absolutely right, sir. This was an assault on the civil rights of all Americans. Whether the left wants to see it or not, the same thing could happen to them. And that's a cautionary tale for, as you said, all Americans. It's our Constitution as a whole that was shredded by these D.C. judges that should have known better.
looking forward.
Yes, sir.
You've now you hit January 21st, 2025.
Yes, sir.
And you've got this fantastic little piece of paper, or at least a PDF anyway.
Yes, sir.
That declares you pardoned by the President of the United States. So legally, you can go registered voters again. Legally, you're fighting with the FAA. That's going to work itself out thanks to Congressman Gill and Van Dyne, and those kind of and Congressman Fallon. I don't want to leave him about Congressman Fallon. That's great. But you can't. That pardon might erase the the legal lines. But it doesn't erase the harm done to your reputation.
No, sir.
The Air Force Times writing about what a meanie head poopy pants you are, right? You've got the Air Force Academy Alumni Association saying, well, shame. These kind of reputational things done. It seems like for a lot of us, you go through that. Maybe the inclination is, I think I'm just going to curl up in a little ball in a little hole somewhere and just kind of be left alone. You haven't done that, though.
No, sir.
You're talking louder today than you have at any point in your past.
Yes, sir. So once I realized that I could not register voters for President Trump, I decided to take X and turn it into a megaphone that I could use to defend the administration and to attack, I'm going to say, members of our own party that are not doing Republican things. And so I also made the determination that I wanted to get involved in local politics and run for office. And my reason for that is to make sure that what happened to me never happens again. And I honestly believe that I can contribute based off of my experiences as a warrior for the United States, as well as somebody that spent time as a political prisoner. I can help the state of Texas. And so that's my next step. Now, in terms of being loud, absolutely. I've built a space on X that is routinely attracting over 1,000 people daily that listen to it, usually between 300 or 400 at any one time. And it's just going to continue to grow. I started with 4 people in July of last year. And like I said, this is where I am now. So we were approached by, an OBBM to actually broadcast for them. And so we're looking to expand the voice there. So we'll see. But yeah, I intend to get loud. I also think that telling my story, I believe that the January 6th narrative that the Democrats injected into the American body politic was a poison. And the only way to leach that poison from the American body is to tell our stories. And so I encourage all of my fellow January 6ers to reach out and start talking and tell what happened to them, because it is a cautionary tale of creeping fascism into our beloved republic.
It's very easy, I think, for me to sit here and hear your story, read through kind of the accounts of what's happened and think, oh, well, thank goodness I'm in Texas.
Yes, sir.
Thank goodness we're in Texas, where that's a federal problem. That's a problem of the federal government. But in fact, just like a poison doesn't just stay in your stomach, it leaches throughout your body. In the same way, this poison of status quo, establishmentarian narratives is not restrained just to the judiciary, the federal government. We're seeing it at all levels of government, spreading into all areas.
Yes, sir. We definitely are. And we want our representatives to represent the people and to represent the values. One of the things that, as I look at the Republican Party, the party I love, my party since childhood, since Ronald Reagan, we have got to stop what you just said. We've got to stop being a uniparty. We've got to stop trying to build consensus. I want Republicans to do Republican things. And so I don't want them to cooperate or collaborate with the Democrats. How can I collaborate with somebody that wants to groom my children into transgender ideology, or with a party that doesn't want to respect the border, a party that glorifies criminal behavior? I just can't put up with that as a Texan. And so I want to see a better version of Republicans. Our president showed us the way. Our governor shows us the way. We have great new freshmen inside the House, right. Mitch Little, Shelley Luther, Andy Hopper. I count those people as friends, and I've had the opportunity to talk to them.
Outstanding. Larry Brock, thank you for being willing to speak out. Thank you for being willing to not curl up in that hole, but rather to encourage others to fight against tyranny.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Thank you.
And thank you for joining this conversation with Real Texans. See you next time.